Chaos erupted at the wedding of the year. Guests gasped as a police officer stormed in, slapped handcuffs on the groom, and dragged him away. The bride stood frozen, tears streaming down her face, unable to comprehend the shocking betrayal. Whispers filled the luxurious hall. Why was the billionaire arrested on his happiest day? Cameras flashed, chaos reigned, and everyone wondered what secret from the past had caught up with the groom, turning a dream wedding into a nightmare. The sun had barely dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the sprawling estate perched on the cliffs of Malibu. The sound of Pacific waves crashing against the rocks below provided a serene backdrop. But inside the gates of the mansion, the air buzzed with anticipation, opulence, and whispers of envy. This was no ordinary wedding. It was a spectacle, a showcase of wealth, influence, and power. Guests from across the world had flown in on private jets, donning designer gowns, tailored tuxedos, and diamond-encrusted watches that caught the light with every movement. Among them were celebrities, politicians, CEOs, and socialites, each more glamorous than the last, all converging to witness the union of one of the most prominent figures in the business world, Damien Blackwell. Damien Blackwell. The name alone commanded respect, admiration, and for some resentment. At 38, he was a self-made billionaire who had built his empire from scratch. Tech startups, real estate ventures, and a hedge fund that consistently outperformed Wall Street projections had cemented his status. Yet, beyond the boardrooms and press releases, Damien carried a persona carefully curated for the public eye. Charismatic, generous, polished, and impeccably dressed. Behind closed doors, only a select few knew the complexity of his life. The shadows hidden behind his carefully sculpted image. Tonight, however, there was no time for reflection. Tonight, all eyes were on him. Damien, in a custom-tailored midnight blue tuxedo, stood at the altar, his posture regal, his jaw set with the practiced confidence of a man accustomed to attention. The soft hum of a string quartet filled the air, mingling with the subtle scent of orchids and roses that adorned every surface. The guests murmured in excitement, sipping on Dom Perignon and nibbling on hors d'oeuvres crafted by Michelin-starred chefs. Everything about this night screamed perfection. Then she appeared, Avery Sinclair, Damien's bride. She descended the grand staircase with the poise of a queen, her white silk gown flowing like liquid snow, delicate lace trailing behind her. Her eyes, dark and luminous, sparkled with tears of happiness, or perhaps the weight of the moment. Avery was no stranger to the world of wealth and power. She had grown up in an influential family, attended elite universities, and carved a name for herself in philanthropy. Yet tonight, as she approached the altar, the smile on her lips was genuine, untouched by pretense. Her hands trembled slightly as she reached for Damien's, but the warmth of his grasp steadied her, and for a fleeting moment, it seemed as if the entire world had ceased to exist, leaving only the two of them suspended in a bubble of love and admiration. The officiant, a renowned minister known for his eloquence, began to speak, weaving words of devotion, commitment, and eternal love. Cameras flashed discreetly, capturing each radiant smile, each subtle glance, each promise exchanged. Guests leaned forward in their seats, captivated not just by the ceremony, but by the palpable chemistry between the bride and groom. The music swelled, voices hushed, and every detail, from the crystal chandeliers above to the rose petals scattered along the aisle, spoke of meticulous planning and unmatched extravagance. But as the ceremony reached its emotional zenith, with vows exchanged and rings sliding on the fingers, a subtle tension began to weave through the crowd, almost imperceptible at first. A whisper here, a glance there, as if an unspoken understanding had passed among a select few. The feeling was fleeting, easily dismissed amidst the grandeur and celebration. After all, what could possibly disrupt a night so carefully orchestrated to perfection? And yet, the world has a way of reminding us that perfection is often a fragile illusion. It started with a sudden commotion at the entrance of the mansion. Guests turned, curiosity piqued, as a uniformed figure appeared, moving with purposeful determination through the crowd. At first, murmurs spread like wildfire. Security, a guest-late arrival, perhaps a misunderstanding. But as the man approached the altar, the air shifted from casual curiosity to tense apprehension. This was no ordinary guest. This was a police officer, and he was walking directly toward Damien Blackwell. Time seemed to slow. Avery's smile faltered. Damien's eyes narrowed, a flicker of recognition, or perhaps alarm, crossing his face. The guests froze, glasses halfway to lips, fingers poised mid-gesture, as the officer reached Damien with unnerving speed. The officiant stopped mid-sentence, the words of love and commitment hanging awkwardly in the air, unsaid. Then it happened. The officer didn't hesitate. In one swift motion, he produced a pair of handcuffs and snapped them onto Damien's wrists. The metallic click reverberated through the hall like a gunshot, silencing the murmurs and drawing gasps from every corner. Damien's expression hardened, a mixture of shock, indignation, and a barely restrained fury. Avery's hands flew to her mouth, her body frozen, as if the very ground beneath her had shifted. Damien Blackwell, the officer announced, his voice firm, unwavering. "You are under arrest." A wave of disbelief rippled through the crowd. The idea seemed inconceivable, an impossibility. Guests whispered, their voices overlapping in panic and confusion. "Arrest? Here? Now? Is this a mistake? I don't believe this." Cameras began flashing more frantically, capturing the scene in real time. Social media notifications exploded as attendees filmed the shocking spectacle, streaming live to audiences around the globe. A billionaire groom arrested at his own wedding. No one had ever imagined such a scandal. Damien attempted to speak, to reason, to command the room, but the officer was unyielding. The handcuffs tightened, a tangible symbol of his sudden vulnerability. The crowd's fascination shifted from admiration to horror. The narrative had flipped in an instant. The man who controlled empires, who commanded loyalty and respect, who had orchestrated an extravagant wedding to perfection, was now at the mercy of the law. Avery's mind raced. Her wedding, her dreams, the culmination of years of planning and love, was unraveling in real time. She wanted to scream, to fight, to demand answers, but her body refused to obey. She could only watch, heart hammering in her chest, as Damien was guided, no dragged, toward the exit. The officer's grip was firm, unrelenting, and every step seemed to echo through her soul. Guests murmured in disbelief, some trying to intervene, others frozen by shock. And then, as the distance between Damien and Avery grew, a terrible realization struck her. The man she had promised forever to, the man she had trusted implicitly, was leaving, not voluntarily, but forcibly. The sight seared itself into her memory. Damien, in his immaculate tuxedo, looking both defiant and vulnerable, disappearing to the grand double doors while she remained rooted to the spot. The room seemed to shrink around her, the applause and laughter of earlier celebrations replaced by an oppressive silence punctuated by gasps and whispers. Questions swirled in her mind, overwhelming and relentless. Why? What had he done? Who had orchestrated this humiliation? Was this an elaborate mistake, a misunderstanding, or something far more sinister? And most importantly, what did this mean for them, for their marriage, for the life they had envisioned together? Guests began to murmur among themselves, some approaching the officer with hesitant questions, others calling contacts or posting frantic updates to social media. The spectacle had become global news within minutes, the story of the billionaire's arrest at his own wedding dominating feeds, trending hashtags and tabloid headlines. Paparazzi stationed outside the estate's gates were already scrambling to capture every moment, their lenses focused on Damien's exit, Avery's stunned face, and the swirling chaos of disbelief that had consumed the once perfect celebration. Avery's hands trembled as she sank into the nearest chair, trying to process what had just occurred. The room felt alien, distant, and unrecognizable. Her dreams of a fairy tale wedding had collided violently with a reality she could scarcely comprehend. The officer's presence, so authoritative and immovable, had transformed the narrative entirely. The night that was meant to celebrate love, unity, and prosperity had become a stage for scandal, intrigue, and unanswered questions. And amid the swirling confusion, one thought pierced through the haze with piercing clarity. Nothing would ever be the same again. The grand doors of the mansion slammed behind Damien with a finality that echoed through the hall like a thunderclap. The remaining guests froze, the sound vibrating through their chests, leaving them momentarily paralyzed. The air felt thick, almost suffocating, as whispers and murmurs swirled into a cacophony of disbelief and shock. Champagne flutes trembled in hands that were once steady, and servers hovering with trays of delicacies paused mid-step, unsure whether to proceed or flee. Avery sat motionless in her chair, her mind a whirlwind of confusion and terror. Her wedding day, the culmination of dreams, effort, and anticipation, had turned into a surreal nightmare in mere seconds. Her hands were still trembling, cold and clammy despite the warmth of the room. Her throat ached from the desire to scream, but no sound emerged. The luxury surrounding her, the ornate chandeliers, gilded decorations, and meticulously arranged flowers, felt grotesquely absurd against the brutal reality that had just unfolded. Damien was gone, arrested, taken away in handcuffs. For a few moments, the world seemed suspended, time itself refusing to move. Guests who had been reveling in laughter and admiration now exchanged nervous glances, uncertain how to respond. Some reached for their phones, filming or posting live updates, unable to resist the temptation of documenting history. Others whispered feverishly, crafting their own versions of the story, each more exaggerated than the last. The whispers coalesced into a tense hum, a low-frequency vibration that seemed to press against Avery's chest. Finally, she found her voice, or perhaps it found her. "Why?" she whispered aloud, though she knew no one could answer her. She felt her legs wobble beneath her, as if the polished marble floor had transformed into quicksand. The officiant, still holding the ceremonial book, hovered nearby, a look of discomfort etched across his face. "Miss Sinclair, perhaps he began, unsure how to proceed. Avery shook her head, unable to focus on words, her mind spinning in circles. Guests began to stir, a few brave souls approaching her cautiously. Veronica Hayes, a longtime family friend and socialite, grabbed Avery's hand in an attempt at reassurance. "Honey, stay calm. We don't know the details yet. Damien, he's probably just caught in some mix-up. You'll see, this will all be sorted out." But Avery couldn't be calmed. The words fell hollow, meaningless against the image seared into her memory. Damien's hands cuffed, his proud stance forced into submission, dragged toward an uncertain fate. Her heart hammered violently, adrenaline coursing through her veins, drowning rational thought. Her wedding, her perfect moment, had been violated in the most public, humiliating manner possible. In the midst of the chaos, murmurs of speculation ran rampant. Was this a legal issue? A business scandal? An old vendetta? Some whispered of criminal activity, others of political entanglements. Social media posts went viral in seconds, some drawing sympathy for Damien, others mocking the scene. Billionaire arrested at wedding trended within minutes, and images of Damien's arrest, shot from multiple angles by shocked guests, spread like wildfire. The global attention, Avery realized with horror, would not be fleeting. This incident would define the rest of their lives, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. Her phone buzzed repeatedly, messages and calls flooding in. Family, friends, and even business associates were all reaching out, some in concern, others in shock. Avery's fingers trembled as she scrolled through a barrage of notifications, barely able to comprehend the flood of information. Among the messages, one stood out, sending a chill down her spine. It wasn't a mistake. They'd been planning this. Be careful. The sender was anonymous. Avery's pulse quickened. Her mind raced to interpret the meaning. Who could have sent this? What did they mean by planning this? And why now, on the night of their wedding? The questions piled on top of each other, each one heavier than the last, pressing her down into a pit of unease. Meanwhile, outside the mansion, Damien was escorted into a sleek black SUV. The officer's grip was unyielding, the handcuffs a permanent reminder of the abrupt shift in power. Damien's expression was unreadable, controlled calm, and yet beneath the surface, a storm of fury and disbelief raged. He had anticipated challenges, battles in boardrooms and legal disputes, but never humiliation on the very night that was meant to celebrate love and triumph. As the vehicle pulled away, he caught a glimpse of Avery standing at the doorway, frozen, pale, and trembling. His heart clenched. She looked vulnerable, lost, and the thought that this image would haunt him for years sent a wave of guilt and anger surging through him. Back inside, the guests were beginning to settle into an uneasy rhythm of speculation. Business associates whispered in corners, attempting to rationalize what had occurred. Some speculated that Damien's companies were under investigation, that he might be implicated in some clandestine financial scandal. Others theorized a personal vendetta, perhaps orchestrated by rivals seeking revenge. Avery overheard snippets of conversation that made her stomach churn. He always had enemies in the financial world. Someone must have evidence to justify this. I wonder if this is political. Billionaires like him can't afford to slip up publicly. Avery's thoughts, however, were far from speculative. She thought only of Damien, her husband, her partner, her love. And as she sat there, tried to comprehend the enormity of what had happened, a chilling realization settled over her. She didn't know the truth. She didn't know what Damien had done, why this was happening, or whether the man she married had secrets she hadn't yet discovered. And worse, the public nature of the humiliation meant that even if Damien was innocent, the damage was already done. As minutes turned into hours, Avery began to feel the oppressive weight of isolation. Friends and family attempted to console her, but the shock had left her numb, distant from reality. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Damien's cuffed hands, the firm grip of the officer, the finality in the expressions of those escorting him away. Her mind raced with scenarios. What if this was permanent? What if Damien was sent to jail for something he didn't do? How would their families react? How would the media portray them? Each question spiraled into 1,000 others, overwhelming her with fear and uncertainty. It was then that Avery noticed a figure lingering near the edge of the crowd, a man she didn't recognize. Tall, sharply dressed, with an air of quiet authority, he observed her intently, his gaze piercing and calculating. Avery felt an inexplicable shiver run down her spine. There was something familiar in the way he held himself, something that suggested knowledge of the situation far beyond what anyone else possessed. The man approached cautiously, bowing slightly in deference. "Miss Sinclair," he said, his voice calm but urgent. "My name is Elias Grant. I work with Damien, and I need to speak with you. Privately." Avery hesitated, instinctively wary. The world had shifted in a single moment, and she had no framework to understand whom to trust. But something in his eyes, the urgency laced with strange familiarity, compelled her to follow him. They stepped away from the crowd, down a quiet corridor lined with priceless artwork, and finally into a small, secluded study. Elias closed the door behind them, his expression serious. "Avery, I'm going to be blunt. This wasn't random. Damien's arrest, everything you saw tonight, was orchestrated. There are forces working against him, against you, and the timing, it was deliberate. They chose your wedding because it would hurt him the most, and because it would send a message." Avery felt a chill run down her spine. Who? Who would do this?" she whispered, voice shaking. Elias hesitated. "Powerful people. People who want Damien out of the way. People who don't care who they hurt in the process. I can't give you details yet. It's dangerous. But you need to stay strong, and more importantly, you need to keep your distance from the media until we understand who's involved." Avery nodded slowly, absorbing the weight of his words. Her wedding night had transformed into a battlefield, and she had been unwittingly thrust into the heart of a conspiracy that threatened not only Damien's freedom, but their entire future. The room felt smaller, the walls closing in as the reality of the situation sank in. And in that moment, Avery made a silent vow. She would not let Damien face this alone. She would uncover the truth, confront the people responsible, and reclaim the life they had been denied. No matter the danger, no matter the cost. Because love, she realized, was not about perfection or grandeur. It was about standing together when the world fell apart. The SUV's tires crunched against the gravel driveway as Damien Blackwell sat in the back seat, the cuffs biting into his wrists, a cold reminder that power was no shield against the machinery of law enforcement. He stared through the tinted window at the estate, receding into the distance, the opulent mansion and its golden lights blurring into streaks of color. His mind, sharp and analytical as always, raced through the events of the past hour, each moment scrutinized for clues, for mistakes, for signs of betrayal. He had faced hostile boards, aggressive competitors, and relentless journalists, but nothing in his life had prepared him for this. Arrested at his own wedding, publicly, on live video feeds now trending worldwide, the humiliation burned, but beneath it simmered a deeper, more insidious anger. Someone had orchestrated this. Someone powerful enough to manipulate law enforcement and time the strike with precision. And they weren't done. The SUV pulled up to a nondescript government building on the outskirts of Los Angeles, a facility Damien had passed dozens of times without a second thought. Inside, the environment was sterile, almost clinical. Harsh fluorescent lights reflected off polished floors. Officers moved with practiced efficiency, and the hum of computers provided a constant, oppressive background noise. Damien was led to an interrogation room, the metallic scrape of his cuffs against the table punctuating each step. He sat down, his posture taut, eyes narrowing as the door closed behind him. Across from him, a man in a sharp suit, plain clothes unmarked and undeniably authoritative, settled into the opposite chair. He was neither friendly nor overtly hostile. His calm demeanor carried a weight that immediately put Damien on edge. "Mr. Blackwell," the man began, voice measured, precise, "you are a person of immense influence, and influence makes enemies. I'm not here to debate your innocence or guilt. I'm here to understand the situation, and perhaps to offer you guidance." Damien's jaw tightened. "Guidance? You're the ones who dragged me out of my wedding in handcuffs. The public humiliation alone is enough to destroy me. How do you propose I take guidance from you?" The man's lips curved slightly, not quite a smile. "I understand your anger, Mr. Blackwell. But understand this. The forces aligned against you are not ordinary. This is not a random legal matter. Someone with immense resources, connections, and influence wants you out of the picture. Your wedding was the perfect opportunity to destabilize you. Emotional leverage is a powerful tool." Damien leaned back, his mind processing every word. The officer's statement confirmed what he had already suspected. This was orchestrated. It was personal, and it was calculated. But who had the audacity, the reach, and the motive to attack him in such a theatrical manner? Competitors? Political figures? Ex-business partners? His eyes narrowed as a plan began forming. Meanwhile, back at the mansion, Avery was far from idle. Though the initial shock had paralyzed her, she was no stranger to high-stakes challenges. She had grown up in environments where power, influence, and manipulation were tools to be navigated with skill. And now, faced with a crisis that threatened her husband and their life together, she tapped into that same determination. She retreated to a private suite within the estate, shutting the door to the world outside. Phones, tablets, laptops, all at her disposal, became instruments of investigation. Avery began piecing together threads. Damien's recent business decisions, any potential conflicts, media reports, and even subtle changes in behavior she had noticed over the past months. Everything was scrutinized. Every detail, no matter how minor, was analyzed for patterns, for hidden motives, for signs of conspiracy. Her first breakthrough came in the form of a cryptic email Damien had received weeks prior, which he had casually dismissed. The subject line had been innocuous, "For your eyes only," but the contents, now revisited, hinted at pressure, threats, and warnings that had been subtle enough to evade immediate attention, but glaring under the lens of hindsight. Avery's heart raced as she realized that this was not just about Damien's business. This was about dismantling his reputation, his personal life, and potentially his freedom. While Avery worked tirelessly to gather intelligence, Damien's situation in custody grew tense. Interrogation, surveillance, and careful monitoring made every hour feel like an eternity. He had access to lawyers, of course, but the rapid escalation of the situation required him to be strategic, measured, and ruthless in his thinking. Every question asked by the authorities, every glance exchanged, carried hidden agendas. Damien quickly recognized that some within the system were being manipulated, that this was no ordinary arrest. The conspiracy ran deeper than he could have anticipated. Hours passed. Damien's legal team fought to secure basic rights, while Avery worked behind the scenes to uncover evidence and connect dots. She leveraged her contacts, calling in favors from journalists, private investigators, and old acquaintances in law enforcement. Slowly, A pattern emerged. Damien's recent business ventures, particularly a merger with a global tech conglomerate, had threatened entrenched powers. Certain competitors have been quietly mobilizing, planting seeds of misinformation, bribing officials, and preparing for a strike that would destabilize Damien completely. As Avery dug deeper, she realized something chilling. This was bigger than either of them. The arrest was only the opening act. Behind the curtain, a network of corruption, deceit, and ambition moved with surgical precision. Damien had been targeted not for a single misstep, but because he represented a threat, a symbol of wealth, innovation, and influence that certain forces could not tolerate. Back in the interrogation room, Damien received a visit from an unexpected ally, Elias Grant, the man Avery had spoken with earlier. His presence brought both reassurance and urgency. Damien, Elias said quietly, the arrest isn't the full story. The people behind this, they have long-term plans. They want to isolate you, weaken your influence, and discredit you entirely. Avery is already working to counteract their moves, but you need to remain sharp. Every word, every action, calculated. You cannot afford mistakes. Damien nodded, the anger and frustration in his chest now tempered by focus. I understand, but how deep does this go? Elias's gaze was unwavering, deeper than most can imagine. You made enemies at the highest levels, board members, international competitors, political figures, and they won't stop until they see you destroyed. Your wedding was just the beginning. The real fight is about to start. The weight of the revelation settled over Damien like a storm cloud. Yet, amidst the tension and danger, a spark ignited within him. This was not merely a struggle for reputation or wealth. It was a battle for justice, for truth, and for the life he had built with Avery. He resolved then and there that he would not be a pawn in someone else's game. Every move, every decision would be calculated, deliberate, and strategic. Meanwhile, Avery's investigation began to yield results. She uncovered financial anomalies, suspicious communications, and connections that traced back to powerful individuals who stood to gain from Damien's downfall. Each discovery deepened the web of conspiracy, but also armed her with the knowledge necessary to act. She began coordinating discreetly with legal experts, journalists, and private investigators, creating a network designed to counteract the forces aligned against Damien. Together, though separated by circumstance, Damien and Avery were preparing for confrontation. Damien, from custody, began strategizing with his legal team, understanding every nuance of the accusations and identifying allies within the system. Avery, in the mansion, acted as the eyes and ears in the outside world, unearthing the hidden network orchestrating their downfall. As night descended over Los Angeles, the tension between visibility and secrecy, power and vulnerability, intensified. Damien was confined, cuffed, and watched, but his mind raced freely, formulating strategies and anticipating moves. Avery was untethered physically, but emotionally weighed by the enormity of responsibility, piecing together the puzzle of deceit with precision and determination. The world outside remained unaware of the intricate battle unfolding behind closed doors. Social media continued to erupt with speculation, tabloids published half-truths, and the public gawked at the spectacle of the billionaire's arrest. Yet, neither Damien nor Avery allowed themselves distraction. They understood that perception could be manipulated, rumors could be engineered, and enemies could exploit even the smallest misstep. Their focus was absolute, their resolve unshakable. And as the clock ticked, each moment brought them closer to confrontation. The conspiracy that had hijacked their wedding was only the opening salvo. The real fight, for justice, for truth, and for the life they envisioned together, was just beginning. Damien, in his cell, flexed his fingers against the restraints, eyes burning with determination. Avery, surrounded by documents and screens, her hair disheveled from hours of work, felt a similar fire ignite within her. Across the city, unseen forces continued to move, plotting, scheming, confident that their plan was foolproof. But they had underestimated the unity, intelligence, and courage of the two people at the heart of the storm. The war had begun, and neither Damien nor Avery intended to lose. The night was heavy with tension, the kind of oppressive stillness that precedes a storm. Inside the mansion, Avery sat surrounded by files, tablets, and printed reports, a makeshift war room fueled by coffee, determination, and a refusal to succumb to panic. Each piece of information she uncovered felt like a puzzle piece falling into place, revealing a larger picture of calculated malice. Financial transactions, off-the-record communications, and carefully concealed bribes traced a clear path. Damien had been targeted by someone with access to both wealth and influence, someone intent on dismantling him entirely. The final piece of the puzzle arrived unexpectedly. A secured email, sent anonymously, contained a video recording of a clandestine meeting. In the footage, a shadowed figure discussed the orchestration of Damien's arrest, the timing of his humiliation, and the manipulation of authorities. Avery's breath caught as she recognized the voice. Maxwell Durant, a rival billionaire with a long-standing vendetta against Damien. Durant's empire had been threatened by Damien's recent merger with an international tech conglomerate. He had orchestrated the arrest as both a personal and professional strike, a public spectacle meant to destroy Damien's credibility and, by extension, Avery's trust. Avery felt a surge of anger so intense it made her chest ache. This wasn't just about money or business. It was about power, pride, and the satisfaction of seeing someone she loved humiliated. Her hand shook as she dialed Damien's lawyer, her voice calm yet urgent. "We have proof. Durant is behind this. We need to act immediately before he can manipulate anything further." Meanwhile, Damien sat in the sterile confines of the interrogation room, mentally preparing for what he knew would be a storm. Elias Grant had delivered updates from Avery, discreetly relayed through channels Damien's legal team controlled. He understood now. This was not a random arrest, not a legal misstep, not a mistake. It was an attack by a man who had underestimated the resilience, intelligence, and unity of the Blackwell couple. Damien flexed his wrists against the cuffs, his mind spinning with strategy, anticipating every move Durant might make. When the door finally opened, Damien was escorted not to a cell, but to a private conference room. His legal team, Avery's investigators, and a small contingent of trusted officials waited. The room was tense, the air charged with anticipation and unspoken understanding. Damien's eyes met Avery's across the room via a secure video link, and a silent acknowledgement passed between them. They would not be broken. The confrontation with Durant was meticulously planned. Leveraging the evidence Avery had uncovered, Damien's team exposed a network of bribery, manipulation, and deceit. Financial documents, communication logs, and surveillance footage painted a damning portrait of Durant's orchestrations. The authorities, faced with irrefutable evidence, had no choice but to act. Durant, confident in his ability to evade accountability, had misjudged one crucial factor: the relentless drive of Damien and Avery, fueled by love, intelligence, and righteous indignation. In a decisive move, law enforcement agents arrested Durant, handcuffs mirroring the very symbol of humiliation Durant had sought to impose on Damien. The irony was not lost on anyone in the room. Damien, now free from custody, stepped back into mansion under the watchful eyes of his allies, greeted by guests who had waited with bated breath. Applause, tentative at first, surged into a roar of relief, admiration, and celebration. Damien's return was more than a personal victory. It was a statement of resilience, justice, and the unassailable power of truth. Avery rushed to Damien's side, embracing him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "You're safe?" she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. Damien held her, the weight of the past hours finally dissipating, replaced by a fierce sense of triumph. "We're safe," he corrected, a small smile breaking through his stoic demeanor. Together. The aftermath was surreal. News outlets covered the story with dramatic fervor. Social media buzzed with admiration for Damien's resilience, and Durant's fall from power became the centerpiece of countless discussions in business circles. Yet, for Damien and Avery, the public spectacle was secondary. The real victory lay in their unity, their ability to navigate the storm, and the reaffirmation of trust between them. In the days that followed, Avery and Damien took deliberate steps to secure their personal and professional lives. Security measures were heightened, business alliances reevaluated, and networks of allies strengthened. Every aspect of their empire was scrutinized, reinforced, and fortified against future threats. Yet, beyond the pragmatism, they carved out moments of intimacy, celebrating their love not through opulence or grandeur, but through the simple, profound joy of being together. Their wedding, though marred by an unforgettable scandal, became a legendary story, not a humiliation, but of triumph. A narrative of how love, intelligence, and courage could overcome manipulation, deceit, and ambition. Damien and Avery's story resonated far beyond their immediate circles, inspiring admiration and respect for the way they handled adversity. Even as the media frenzy continued, the couple remained grounded. Damien, once again in command of his empire, reflected on the ordeal with clarity. The arrest, the conspiracy, the betrayal, none of it could diminish the foundation he and Avery had built. Rather, it strengthened it. Every challenge faced, every injustice endured, became a testament to their resilience and strategic brilliance. Avery, too, emerged transformed. The experience had tested her intellect, patience, and courage, pushing her into roles she had never imagined she would need to occupy. She had become more than a supportive spouse. She had become an indispensable partner in both life and business, a force equal to Damien in vision and determination. In the end, the Blackwell wedding was remembered not for the arrest, not for scandal, but for the incredible comeback, the reclaiming of dignity, love, and power against insurmountable odds. Damien and Avery stood together, not just as husband and wife, but as a united front against any force that might challenge them. They had survived public humiliation, conspiracy, and betrayal, emerging stronger, wiser, and more united than ever. And as they walked hand in hand to the restored halls of their mansion, the golden light of sunset streaming through the windows, Avery whispered, "We made it." Damien smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "We did. And nothing can ever break us." For Damien Blackwell and Avery Sinclair, the wedding that had begun in shock and scandal ended in triumph and reaffirmation. Their love, tested and proven against the harshest of trials, stood as a testament to resilience, strategy, and unshakable trust. The world had watched in disbelief, but the couple emerged not only victorious but untouchable, ready to face whatever new challenges the future might hold, together.